What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's transfer tips for Game Week 11. So I'm going to go through some of the popular moves in and out and give you my opinion on them. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you're new around here as well. We're going to start off with Phil Foden. Over 344,000 transfers in already this week. Extremely popular. There's been a lot of discussions about value for money this season. And Foden is definitely right up there. If you look at Man City, he's outscored Kevin De Bruyne and he's over 4 million cheaper. And right now, it's very difficult to split them. Obviously, some people will have both, and you might be looking at that from Game Week 13 onwards. But if you're just going for one, I don't really see any reason why you would go for De Bruyne over Foden right now. He looks to have pretty much as assured minutes. He started every single game in the league. Pep Guardiola even said that it's difficult to leave him out even when he's not playing well. And both have really impressive underlying numbers, so expected goals and expected assists. But Foden's is more geared towards goals, so you get those obviously extra points for that. They're both playing in the same team, so the clean sheet potential and stuff is always there. Yes, there's the chance that he might get brought off early sometimes before the 60th minute, but for 8.2 million he looks great. And from Game Week 13 onwards, he's definitely high up on my wish list of players to bring in. Now, usually I would look at the next two game weeks, Liverpool away in a blank, and think it's absolutely crazy to bring someone like Foden in. But I think most people are expecting Man City to go and score a few goals against Liverpool. They've just conceded 3 to Arsenal. There's no real reason why Man City couldn't do the same to them, given the form that both teams are in. And Liverpool have got mounting problems now. So Luis Diaz is out until after the World Cup, by the looks of it. I've just seen a report this morning to say that Matip is injured for 2 weeks. Now, Konate is back, but he's only just back. Trent is also injured for what looks to be 2 to 3 weeks. They also have a lack of midfielders. This is a team that has mostly played 4-3-3. It hasn't really worked, so they've transitioned to this kind of 4-2-3-1/4-4-2. It worked against Rangers, but that's much easier opposition. It didn't do too well against Arsenal. They did control the ball, Thiago and Henderson, especially Thiago, of course, for a little bit, but I don't know. I feel like if Klopp is going to stick with his formation, he's got to put Fabinho in there alongside Thiago, and also hope that Thiago can stay fit because they've got a lot of matches coming up. So I see why people are targeting this fixture. And I don't think it's completely crazy, because I think from 13 to 16, you're going to want Foden anyway. It all depends on how well you can deal with that blank in Game Week 12. If you're looking to use the free hit, fair enough if that's your strategy. I still think it's worth saving until after the World Cup, but some of you might be doing that, in which case, absolutely lump on Arsenal and Man City players. And of course, some of you might not have 3 already, right? So a lot of us have got like Cancelo, Harden and Martinelli. You might not be in that boat. You might be able to get another player in, bench him in Game Week 12 and have them ready, in which case, fair enough, Foden's a good option. The only time I think I wouldn't do it is if you're doing what I've seen some people discuss, which is bringing in extra Arsenal and Man City players and just not worrying about having 11 players for Game Week 12. And obviously that looks really good right now because Arsenal and Man City are playing brilliantly, but I still don't think it's the best option. I don't think you should just give up a fixture in Game Week 12. I think the likes of Bowen or even Zaha are better options to bring in now and then look to possibly get Foden later. So again, it may be seasons gone past or even a few weeks ago, I would have looked at those 2 next game weeks, Liverpool away and blank, think it's crazy to even consider it. I get why people are doing it. I'm expecting Man City to score a few goals against Liverpool for sure, but I still think there are slightly better options at that price point. If you just don't want to use the transfers or you can get through Game Week 12, fair enough, then Foden is brilliant. But I think Zaha and maybe even Bowen could be slightly better options. So let's stick to Man City for a minute and talk about João Cancelo. He's had over 200,000 transfers in so far this week, which isn't surprising given he got an 18-pointer last week. And I think a lot of the same things apply that I spoke about with Foden. So if you're free hitting in Game Week 12, you can use transfers or you can bench him and still have a full 11. Then he looks like a really good option. From Game Week 13 to 16, there's plenty of opportunity for clean sheets from Man City. And right now, he seems to be the most assured defender in that team for minutes. I do think Akanji is going to get plenty of starts as well, but realistically, Cancelo's the one you want to go for. Money is pretty easy to come by right now, right? And lots of people don't have Trent and Salah and Haaland and all these other expensive players. So to get João Cancelo in your team is pretty easy. And given that he's quite attacking and those fixtures look good for defensive returns, he's still, to me, worth the money over someone like Akanji. We might look to get a second Man City defender in from Game Week 13 onwards, but I think João Cancelo Cancelo should be the number one priority. Now, despite me saying that all those same things apply about, the free hit and whatever in Game Week 12, I do think he is a worse transfer in than Foden is this week. And that is because of that fixture against Liverpool away. No matter what you think about Liverpool and how well they've played so far this season, they are continuing to score goals and they're pretty much set up to attack, right? They have to be because they're not defending that well. We've seen this switch in formation to the kind of 4-2-3-1/4-4-2 to get those four attackers on the pitch, and they are still scoring goals. So it was 2 against Rangers, although they were both from set pieces. And again, you've got to split the results and performances from what's happening from an FPL point of view. So was it a good result against Arsenal? Absolutely not. Did Liverpool want to go and lose that game? Of course not. But from an FPL perspective, if you had an Arsenal defender, you're disappointed because they conceded 3 times. And I could see something similar, or twice, sorry, but I could see something similar happening against Man City. Man City could easily go there and win the game, but I could see Liverpool scoring, right? And that's the difference between Foden and Cancelo. If Liverpool score, Foden loses 1 point for the clean sheet, but he can go and get plenty of assists and plenty of goals as well. João Cancelo, probably not going to happen, right? He absolutely run the show against Southampton. Akanji played right back, and he almost formed like a back three. He did get forward some of the time, but really it was João Cancelo getting forward a lot. He's probably just not going to have that much license against Liverpool. They're not going to let him get forward that much, or at least that should be the game plan from Jurgen Klopp. There's obviously lots of players you got to deal with in that Man City team, but I just don't see Cancelo doing what he did against Southampton when he plays against Liverpool. So as an owner, I could pretty much see a blank in this game. I'd be very surprised if he gets more than kind of 5 points. And look, 5 points would be pretty decent against Liverpool, but I just think there's other defenders you could look at. I will say, the pool of defenders that are much better than just bringing in João Cancelo this week are pretty low. Like, you've got Chelsea defenders, so maybe Cucurella or Reece James. You've got Brighton defenders for Brentford away and Nottingham Forest at home you could look at. Maybe even Wolves defenders. And don't get me wrong, when I say that out loud, it sounds crazy to kind of be saying maybe go for them instead of Cancelo. But I do think going for a Man City defender this week is worse than going for a Man City attacker. And obviously he's going to get no points in Game Week 12 anyway. So we are at a time of the season when everyone's transfer plans and strategy and their team set up and the amount of transfers they have are all going to kind of dictate how you deal with the blank. But I'm just not convinced that João Cancelo is a great player to be bringing in this week, despite that 18-pointer. I just don't see him going and having a similar game against Liverpool. It'll be much more difficult no matter how Liverpool have played so far. So I kind of touched on it earlier, but it looks like Luis Diaz is going to be out until after the World Cup, which is a huge blow for Liverpool. Obviously, he's been brilliant so far this season, and the injuries are starting to mount up. So Matip is also now out as well, or at least that's what reports are saying. Could be 2 to 3 weeks. Now, Konate is back, which is good for Liverpool, but he's only just back. So to now have to play lots of games in a row, that could be difficult for him. And also, Trent Alexander-Arnold is probably going to be out for 2 to 3 weeks. So losing Diaz and even Matip, because he does carry the ball forward quite well, but especially Trent as well, that is losing quite a bit of attacking power. So I do worry a bit more for Liverpool than I maybe did before this week. It probably does mean, before we get on to kind of replacements, that the likes of Jota and Nunez should see their minutes increase. And it's really unfortunate for anyone that was holding on to Luis Diaz because, okay, they didn't do well against Arsenal and they got Man City at home coming up. But after that, the fixtures were pretty good. And he was playing in Game Week 12. Forest and Leeds and Southampton, there could have been plenty of goals in that for him, but it is what it is. It's time to look to get rid. So if you're looking to maybe still have a Liverpool player, then like I said, Jota, Nunez, maybe even Firmino as well, their minutes should go up, especially if we see them in the Champions League continue with that 4-4-2 formation. But ultimately, Luis Diaz has to be sold. Now, Phil Foden is probably one player that a lot of people are looking at. We've already spoken about him. And I did kind of mention that I think Bowen and Zaha are probably the ones that I would look at. Now, if we look at the fixtures, right, obviously we spoke about Zaha quite a lot last week. He only got an assist against Leeds. I think most of us were kind of hoping for a bit more than that. But the fixtures are just pretty good from game weeks 11 all the way up till 16. His underlying numbers are really good. He's on penalties as well. And he's only 7.4 million. Again, money is not really much of an issue right now, given how people's teams are set up. But it's something to consider if you're, struggling to get the funds for a different move, that he's only 7.4 million. So he looks really good. No real issues with fixtures or anything like that. I don't want to put people off James Maddison, but I did speak, get your words right. I did speak last week that the longer you leave it to bring him in, the worse of an option he's going to get. Because from game week 13 to 16, I don't think the fixtures are that great. 3 away games plus Man City at home. So you're kind of running out of really good fixtures for him. The other thing to note is he's on 4 yellow cards. Now, we have to be careful because if you've played FPL for a while, you'll remember the first name that jumps out at me every time I hear about 4 yellow cards is Diego Costa, right? Back when he played for Chelsea. I think he was on 4 yellow cards and 5 was the suspension, or it might have been 9 and 10 was the suspension. Whatever it was, he was 1 yellow card away from a suspension, and a lot of us that didn't own him didn't bring him in, and he went like 5 or 6 games or something like that, and he just didn't get the yellow card, and he kept on scoring goals. And the later we left it, we just couldn't bring him in, right? Because you'd already made that decision to not have him for a few weeks, so you couldn't then decide to bring him in. So I would try and be careful of that with James Maddison, because it could be another 4 or 5 games until he gets that suspension. But I just worry, what if you bring him in for game week 11, he gets that yellow card, and then he misses game week 12 when you're probably already having to deal with a bunch of blank game weeks. So that is one worry I have for him. And I think the big thing right now for kind of, £7 to £8 million midfielders, there's a lot of options, so you don't have to take that risk with Maddison. And I would argue that maybe Zaha and possibly even Bowen, if you're looking all the way from 11 to 16, are possibly slightly better options anyway. They're both on penalties, and if we look at West Ham's fixtures really quickly, they are just as good, if not better. They don't have a great fixture in game week 12 necessarily, Liverpool away, but again, the way they are shipping goals right now, we could see West Ham get 1, get 2 there, and who's to say it's not going to be Jared Bowen. And then outside of that, Southampton away, pretty good fixture. Bournemouth at home looks good. Man United away might be a little bit trickier, but I think the same things apply to Liverpool. If West Ham go there and they're not afraid to attack, they could cause them some problems. And then it's Crystal Palace at home and Leeds at home, which just aren't that bad at all. So I like Maddison. I just think that right now, given all those factors, I'd probably just choose Zaha or Bowen instead. For what it's worth, again, if there was no blank game week, I'd absolutely say just get Saka or Foden. But I think right now you can put that off until game week 30 and onwards. So if you got Luis Diaz, it sucks. The fixtures that were coming up were pretty good. His minutes were looking excellent, but he's got to be sold now. So if you own Luis Diaz, let me know below which midfielder are you bringing in this week. So it saddens me a little bit that we're going to talk about a West Ham forward and it's not Mikel Antonio, but times are changing, so we're going to discuss Gianluca Scamacca instead. And he looks like a pretty good option. 2 goals in his last 2 league games, 6.7 million, so fairly cheap, and a big differential at 1.6% ownership, and over 42,000 of you have already brought him in. We'll come on to the fixtures in a minute. The big thing that's changed is his minutes in the league, right? So he's been integrated quite slowly. He seemed to be the forward that was going to play in the European games, and Antonio was playing in the Premier League, but that seems to have flipped. So if you look at his minutes from the last 2 games, not Antonio, we bring up Scamacca here, so he played 20 minutes against Everton in game week 8, 65 against Wolves, obviously got his goal there, then he played 79 against Fulham, and we'll be able to see if that pattern's going to continue, because West Ham have a game on Thursday before the game week 11 deadline, and if Antonio starts again in Europe, then you can just assume that Scamacca is going to start in the league. So that looks pretty good for minutes right now. The only thing I would say is Antonio's still a really good player, and I think he's a player that Moyes probably really likes. He did such a good job over the last few seasons for West Ham. I think one of the issues with him has been minutes. He had to play so much last year, there was a big drop-off. They didn't have a forward that they could rotate. They have that now. The one thing I want to point out is game week 12 is a midweek game week, right? So the deadline's on the Tuesday. West Ham are playing Liverpool away on the Wednesday. So this is similar to having a European game midweek. So it could be that Scamacca starts in game week 11, Antonio starts in game week 12, then Scamacca comes back in for game week 13. The only thing I would say is that gap between 12 and 13 for West Ham is extremely generous, right? Wednesday to Monday is great. For example, Liverpool are playing Sunday, then Wednesday, and then the early kickoff on the Saturday for game week 13. West Ham's rest from 12 to 13 is very good. So I'm not sitting here saying for sure that Scamacca is definitely going to miss out game week 12, but it is a possibility that Antonio comes back in for that one. But that aside, I would say he looks like a decent option. 6.7 is quite cheap. I think he's one of those where if you need to make a forward transfer, because maybe Mitrovic isn't past fit this week, we're obviously waiting to hear about that, you've still got Isak or someone like that, then you could bring him in. But I don't think that his fixtures are so good that you need to rush out and get him. So if you've got, obviously Haaland's not going anywhere, but if Mitrovic is fit and you've got someone like Tony or Wilson already in your team, and there's only 3 spots to fill for forwards, I don't think Scamacca is now so good you've got to go and get him, but if you've got an injury, you could definitely look at him. I think Liverpool away and Man United away, you're not worried about those fixtures, but they're not like targetable fixtures, right? You're not going out of your way to get players because they're playing in those matches. You just maybe don't mind if a player has them, right? So Bowen, for example, extra point for a goal because he's a midfielder, extra point for a clean sheet. West Ham are defended very well, pretty much guaranteed minutes. He's also on penalties. He's a much bigger draw for me, even though they've got those fixtures. And also because Foden and Saka, for me at least, I'm going to wait until game week 13 onwards. So the player pool for kind of £8 million midfielders to bring in this week is a little bit smaller. Whereas with forwards, I think there are other options. So I like him. I don't think it's a mistake to bring him in, but he's just not one of those players I'd rush out to buy right now. All right, let's talk about Perisic, and he's a bit of a tricky one because last week I was kind of saying I thought he would start the majority of games. If I had him, I'd probably hold on to him. Then he goes and gets benched, so that's now put massive doubts in my mind. Although, to be honest, my opinion shouldn't be changing about him too much. Like, he is, in general, a minutes risk. Even if he starts, he's not guaranteed to make it to 60 minutes. And if we have a look now, I think it's a little bit worrying what's happened. So, he's benched against Brighton. He also got benched against Fulham. He didn't make it to 60 minutes against Leicester, although to be fair, they were doing really well in that game. Obviously, they ended up winning 6-2. And he played against Arsenal, and obviously they conceded. So the last 4 games are a little bit of a worry. And I think one of the things that maybe puts me off even more now is the fact that he was happy to give Doherty a game with Emerson Royale missing out. So when Emerson Royale is back from suspension, and if Doherty proves himself as well over maybe the next couple of games, then suddenly Conte's got 2 players he's okay with playing on the right, and then Perisic is back to competing against Sessegnon. Now, we might see a bit of a pattern. It might be that Perisic starts the next 3 games, but I think Sessegnon has done all right this season, and that is now going to be a bit of an issue for Perisic going forward. I really don't, even like thinking out loud now doing this video, I'm not sure what I would do with him because I think 3 of the next 4 fixtures are okay. Newcastle at home is not an easy fixture. I think they've done very well from an attacking sense so far this year. But I think if I had a defender up against them at home, I'd be okay with it. Bournemouth away and Everton at home, I'm okay with those fixtures as well. I think they probably concede to Man United. They might go and win that game, but I think they concede. So 3 of the next 4 are okay. But how many can we guarantee? And I've gone back and forth with Perisic. So I said this near the start. I think it was before his haul against Wolves that I couldn't go for him because I was worried about his minutes. At some point I was going to miss a big haul. I was just hopeful that the points outside of that wouldn't hurt me too much. And that's pretty much what's happened. He got a 12-pointer, I think it was, against Wolves. But overall his points per match are only 3.2. And it's not that the pattern is so good that you can predict when these benchings are going to happen. And also, if he does get benched, he always comes on. I don't think there's any games so far. Let me just double check. Yeah, no games where he's had a 0 minutes at all. So sometimes in the past we've had players, especially with 5 subs, it just makes it worse. We've had players that you know if they don't play, they're just not going to come on. And so you can risk it because you've always got an option on first bench. With Perisic, it's always a possibility that he's going to get those kind of cameo returns. And to be fair, apart from the 12-pointer in game week 3, he's just really not been great at all. So it might be time to get rid of him. I certainly don't think people are making a mistake taking him out. I mean, you should always try and wait until the European games because if Sessegnon gets injured, that might change the game a little bit. Perisic might have to play a little bit more. But I can see why people are getting rid. It's very tricky, though, to pick a replacement. I think Trent Alexander-Arnold, no one wants to get Liverpool defence right now. He's injured. João Cancelo's about to blank. Same for Arsenal defenders. A lot of people have already got Reece James. If you don't, he should probably be your number 1 target. I think Graham Potter came out recently after the game, after the deadline, and said there was a bit of an issue with him, so they didn't take the risk. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But if he plays in Europe, I expect him to play at the weekend. I don't think he's going to get rotated that much. So Reece James is probably the number 1 pick. You could possibly go for a second Chelsea defender. I don't know who I would buy though. I think I'm between Koulibaly and Cucurella. I just think Cucurella is probably going to be Graham Potter's man still and play most games at left centre back, and so he would probably be the one I'd go for. But there's no guarantee that he starts every game. But if you wanted a second defender, that's probably who I would buy. Whether or not I don't even know if Chelsea's fixtures are that good for a second defender. Newcastle away is tough. Arsenal at home is tough. Man United at home, I think, is pretty tough. Brighton away is not great either. And I think Reece James' attacking upside means not got to have him, but there's very good reason to have him. Whereas Cucurella, I just don't think is going to play left wing back that often. He didn't do that much for Potter last season. And so the attacking upside is not there. You're paying 5.1 million to hope for clean sheets, which they could still get a lot, right? Just because there's loads of away games and tough fixtures doesn't mean it can't happen. Graham Potter's sides are very good defensively, as have Chelsea been over the last few seasons. But the double up just doesn't excite me. I think if you give me really good fixtures and you tell me Chilwell's starting every game, I'm definitely doubling up on James and Chilwell. James and Cucurella are not quite as exciting, but depending on when you need him, right? If you just need him for Villa away and Brentford away, and then you're going to look to get Cancelo back and you have Reece James, you've got Trippier as well to come in too, and you're mostly playing a back three, Cucurella could be okay. Then it's just the other defenders that I've kind of mentioned if you need someone in the short term. So Wolves defenders, Kilman, Nottingham Forest at home this week, then Crystal Palace away in 12 is pretty good. If you need to call upon them for 13 to 16, the fixtures aren't that bad. Arsenal at home is probably the toughest game, so they could be worth a look. Or you've got Brighton defenders. So I'd probably go for Dunk or Webster. You could go for Estupinian, maybe a bit more exciting, but for guaranteed minutes, it really does look like Dunk is the number one, then probably Webster. Brentford away this week, which is maybe not quite as easy as Wolves have got, because Tony could score in that game, of course, or Mboma or any of those players. But Nottingham Forest at home in game week 12 with a blank looks pretty good. So I'm actually looking at possibly bringing in a Brighton defender this week. And if you don't own Trippier, he's a really good option. I'm just a little... I don't know. I would call this thinking. Some people would call it overthinking. But I do think they concede in this game. And so I think the best time to bring Trippier in is probably game week 12. But it's going to depend on how many defender transfers you need over the next couple of weeks. Like, for my personal team, it might be that I can just make one defender transfer this week, one next week, get Brighton, get Trippier, and then roll into game week 13. But if other issues crop up, if Mitrovic is injured and stuff like that, I'll probably just go straight to Trippier. So it's going to depend on who you don't have. So if you're selling Perisic or you're looking for a new defender this week, let me know in the comments below who that is, because I think the options that we can actually get excited about are very, very limited right now. So let me know in the comments below. If you've enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button, and I'll be back tomorrow with another video.